because this is actually my wife and I were discussing this because we flew back to Houston for this trip, and I finally saw A Star Is Born.
Oh, I haven't watched it yet. I almost watched it on the flight here.
Oh man, I want you to watch it. We need to talk about it. And we've seen the story, but what I was wondering with my wife is the main character. She got her break from the male character, and he felt that she wasn't saying what she needed to say, or what he thought was truthful to her as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And then she, as any artist is and goes through, and I'm going through as well, seeking approval from an audience.
Right.
And those two clashed, and I thought it was just a very true line of
and
anybody.
it resonated.
Yeah. Any creative in the field it crosses this boundary and line over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what am I doing? Am I doing something meaningful to myself? Is it meaningful to the audience? Is there a happy medium between those two, the relationship and balance between the two? And that's what I struggle through every single time. So if you add a sponsorship to it, or you have me at home making a project for myself, I just do it. Is this worth what I think is worth doing?
Sure. So what's interesting to me, I want to get back to that, but I want to kind of bring people up to speed on your thoughts on doing these different creative projects and branding things in different ways, and then figuring out ways to fuse them together, right? And this is in relation to what you brought up with the menu art, the live art, and then what I saw as the third element, which was menu art experience / eat with your eyes.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so the way that you were able to look at the parallels between this project, which was live art, which was, stereotypically at an event where you are a exhibitionist almost, versus menu art experience, right? Menu art experience, or eat with your eyes, which was very much so you are a collaborator, you are a event partner almost, right?
Yeah.
So for you to kind of take a step back and say that I'm better off maybe branding Eat With Your Eyes as a live art experience, where does your head go with that? And what would you advise anybody who has a couple of these different projects in the pipeline? Because I'm also guilty of that too, right?
Yeah. Well, one thing is, I want to make sure I say this, like branding and all that. The whole creative and planning process, that doesn't really come through my brain. Like, oh, this is good for the brand and stuff like that. I'm not that. I have a great people and team that help me maintain that.
Mm-hmm.
And then back to your original question, how do you go in between that? I think I've mentioned this before, or mentioned at least in the menu art experience. My art mentor explained that there's 3 components, and we've talked about this before: the artist, the art, and the audience. And in the beginning, I was focused on the art and what could I do for the art, and that kind of reflects back to me as an artist, figuring out what are my skill sets, what can I accomplish. But now I'm more focused on the audience, and if I better understand the audience, I already have the skill set to make the art
contextual.
Exactly. Exactly. Execution is
right.
Yeah. I think now more than ever, ideas are, and this is kind of arrogant for me to say because it's so early, but ideas are the easy part. Execution is the hard part.
And I think that's been something that you've been very good at this whole time, is making sure that when you present an idea, it has some weight to it, right? Like, you don't present something like Eat With Your Eyes, like even the fact that you named it something so that chefs could, and this is something that my business partner talks about all the time, which is something that you can hang your hat on, something that, like, if you would have just said, hey, I kind of want to do this creative thing where I draw at the table during the meal.
Yeah.
As opposed to going to them and saying, hey, I want to do this event. It's called Eat With Your Eyes. I want to collaborate with you on the aesthetic of the food that you create in the way that it presents, so that the guests have a little bit more fun and interact with your food in a way that they wouldn't have normally done it before.
Right.
That is a much more like the way that you tie a bow around it and present it. I
Yeah.
think is much more like
It's much more layered.
yeah. But the fact of the matter is, you were able to do that before executing it on your first one, right? And I think that says something that there's something to be said about that, where you've never done an Eat with Your Eyes event before, but you were able to think through all of these steps before presenting it, right? So,
Well, I'm curious because when you say that, like I don't view it that way, only because I did that Airbnb menu art experience prior to that.
I guess, which was kind of a beta testing thing, but it takes a lot more to go to another chef and ask to be a part of their tasting menu. Like,
that's
I don't
fascinating
know
'cause I
if
never even thought
anyone,
about that.
I don't know of anybody else who's asking to be like, other than maybe like wineries that want to do a pairing, which is not
Right.
even getting involved in the food or the aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's asking a lot of a chef, not in a bad way, but
Right.
like the way that you were able to execute on that idea, which is weird because it's like execute on the idea before the execution.
Right. It's like proof of concept.
There's something to be said there. So if there's somebody who has, something that they want to present to their boss, or a new menu format, or even like a new dish, like they just have a dish in their head and they're a line cook and they just want to present it to their sous chef as like, I want to do a special on this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
What are some things that you think about to kind of like get yourself ready to pitch that? Like what's
that's a
the
good
script
question.
that you roll through in your head of like, this is what they're going to ask and this is what they're going to say? Because I mean,
that's
from
a good
how you
question.
present things to me, I know how you think about it, but I think that you can provide a lot of value in that space. So
Okay. Can I reverse engineer
yeah,
this?
sure.
Or at least, okay. So let's talk about the first time I pitched it to Derek. So kudos to Derek as well. He's the one who allowed me to try this project, and without I don't even know how I pitched it to them. Oh, I know how I pitched it to them. I go, hey, would you ever do a collaboration, Derek? And it was on New Year's Eve, and we both been drinking, and so it's like, yeah, let's do it.
And so maybe here's something else that you hadn't thought about. Did you present it to Derek first because you knew that he had done other crazy, quote unquote, collaborations with doing a cannabis dinner, doing a tattoos dinner, and you knew all of these that were in his portfolio already, so you were able to identify him as a good guinea pig for this idea?
Yeah. Well, when Derek and I first met, I knew the way he talked, and he told his past that he went to art school, so he knew he understood how I viewed the world.
Sure.
And I had a tiny glimpse of how he viewed the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you take that perspective, as we're both artists, whether it be visual, food, whatever, music, all that, if you're both artists, and the hardest thing for every artist who's working as an artist is the next project.
Mm-hmm.
To have an opportunity to work with someone you respect as well as you care for as a friend, I think anybody in a heartbeat would say yes.
Right. So me being the person who's trying to distill takeaways from this, it's to do your homework and try to find out what...
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
So I guess when we're talking about dissecting, what we did is this is probably going to be probably the most boring part of this conversation is Derek and I knew that we're creating an experience, but at the same time we need to fill seats. We need to make sure it sustains itself. We asked all those questions during our second meeting. So yeah, the first yes on New Year's Eve was, hey, yeah, get your foot in the door, but two, prepare yourself. That's what I think a lot of artists in my field don't fully understand, and what I've been learning and still learning and making lots of mistakes is understanding who your audience is, and not just Chef Derek, but where he works at, what his colleagues and bosses will say and stuff like that.
Sure.
And that's what talking about homework. That's the homework that I don't think people realize. And when you ask the very beginning question is like, oh, you're doing it with chefs, are you doing it with now sponsorship, stuff like that? Understanding your audience for the art, but you're also your audience of who you're doing this project with. What are their goals?
Right.
And if you can get all those aligned, then
from the get, basically, right? So for anyone listening, what are those initial questions that they're going to ask when you propose this project? Like, how much is it going to cost? How much do you cost? Right?
Yeah.
Like, how much are we going to charge?
Yeah.
Who's going to staff
on
it?
this podcast?
Yeah. What are you going to chart? Like, who's going to staff it? Right? When are we going to do it? Are you going to try to take over my Saturday night dinner service and try to do this weird creative project? Or are you going to do it on a Monday at 5 p.m. when the restaurant's normally slow?
Yeah, you nailed it.
Like all these initial questions, if you can come armed with the answers to that to kind of like diffuse the bomb before it explodes kind of thing, I think that there's a lot of value there. And the other, you go for it.
Well, because I have notes about this.
Yeah.
So my thoughts is this is if you're pitching it to someone, whoever you're pitching it, and I apologize for cussing. I rarely cuss. Is what I always say is, why the fuck would they do this? Like, if you can't answer that in 1 or 2 sentences, you need to go back to the writing board and figure it out. And I'm reading this book, and it sounds true. In the notes I got, the book's called Getting Past No. And so really there's components of it is how you make a deal, how do you get past no? And that's like back to my original question, is like, why would they do this? Is, well, they're going to say no to something, but jump on the one thing they're going to say yes to.
Oh.
Okay. So if they agree with you 99 things out of 100, that one thing they say yes to is going
to keep bringing that back up.
Exactly.
Keep reinforcing that this is a good idea because we both want to show that we're creative, or we both want to show that we support the arts, right? Like in your case, right? Like,
right. So, but right there, we're talking about it's easy for us to talk about this. It's easy for Chef Derek to agree with that, but his boss is going to be like, why should we do a creative art event?
Right.
But then it's like, hey, it's a new experience that highlights the restaurant. Okay, fair enough. Okay, that's one. Okay,
got it.
But then like, okay, well then, what all comes down is the logistics, and like you mentioned before, time and stuff like that.
Sure.
What it really comes down to is this experience worth value? And that's what you have to answer.
Yep.
Is this valuable to everybody?
Right.
And so the other 2 points I have, I always say, make it easy to say yes for the deal, and then make it hard for them to say no. And those are just easy concepts, but if you can answer those in a well-rounded pitch, I mean,
you're on your way.
You're on your way.
So something else that you said earlier on kind of caught my eye, and I don't want to take this too long because I know we got to both put suits on in a hot second here. You mentioned the 3 pillars that you preach all the time, which is artist, art, and audience. And you mentioned that in the beginning it was more about the art, and now it's more about the audience. So what went through your head in making that shift, and how are you kind of fulfilling those needs, and how are you kind of like perceiving those? Is it because you feel a little bit more comfortable with the product itself? What motivated that switch, and what challenges are you dealing with right now with that?
Well, I think it's just a little more confidence in what I can do. A perfect example is if on Instagram, how many posts I have. That's how many times I've been drawing just for that menu art.
Sure.
And there's more I'm drawing, but beyond that. So I've gotten comfortable what my craft is. And so the next challenge as an artist is like, well, do you change your craft completely and learn something new, or you put it into a different environment and you adapt? And I'm just too old to learn something new, so I'm jumping to adapt. And the easiest step is just understanding the audience more.
Sure.
Because, like you said earlier, that I just never knew is like, how did you get Chef Derek? Because it's so hard to do this and this. Like, I had no clue. That how hard it is because I've never been a chef.
Totally.
And you bringing that up just makes me realize, like, I don't even know my audience in terms of not just diners. I felt that's what I was trying to learn, but who I work with. Right. And so right there, just there's still a whole avenue to learn. Right. So it's just the next easiest step where I perceive things.
Yeah. So you're very good, and this is something that chefs are not always great at, is asking for direct feedback. And it's something that I've seen you do, especially when I started to see you make that transition between worrying more about the art and then worrying more about the audience. You would conduct almost, I mean, they were customer satisfaction surveys on steroids. You would sit people down, you would have elaborate conversations with them, you would ask them these sometimes probing questions that would give you some insight into how was their experience, what did they enjoy, what did they not enjoy, would they recommend it to a friend, did you learn that from somewhere, or was that something that you were just naturally curious about? And because there's a lot of fear behind asking those questions. So can you talk a little bit about that? And then I want to take that one more step further.
I mean, one, that's a great question. I think I need a lot of time to contemplate that. My initial reaction right now to that is just how I've been raised. My, not to be stereotypical, but Asian household, my mom kind of was like a tiger mom, and nothing ever was good enough.
Right.
And so that's one component. The other component is just my internal fear that, and I still fight with this, is like, I want to perform the best I can. And it's not like a test where you get 100 out of 100.
Right.
It's, you just do the best you can.
Sure.
But I can't stop not thinking. Like, if I got 98 out of 100, what's the 2 points I didn't get?
So, but then my question goes to, do you ask those questions of the guests that you had at your experience to figure out what your score was?
Oh.
Because to me, most people who are like that, who perceive their work as not good enough, they look for that in the moment reaction of someone smiling when they take a bite, or the big reveal and their eyes light up or whatever. And then that is all the validation they need. And most people like that will not probe and ask the question of, what did you think about this? Would you recommend this to a friend?
Oh, that's fascinating.
Because it's like asking your mom when you're just got done with your recital performance, what did you think? Right? Like, her initial reaction should, or even just the fact that she didn't say that she was disappointed should be enough to validate. Do you know what I mean? So like, there's something else in you that the fear doesn't exist, right? Like, you are okay with taking that step further.
Well, I think it goes back to, well, there's 2 points. I think what came up when you asked that is, when I played competitive soccer. I mean, I did Olympic development programs, stuff like that. Like, I was training in high school, tried to be on the Olympic team. And my mom, a perfect example is, at halftime, I would go to the sidelines, and I remember all the other parents be like, good job, you did it. And I go to my mom, I go, what do you think? And then she would just like tear me apart, be like, you didn't miss this, you did this, you let this happen.
But you saw that as valuable.
I saw it as valuable because I think that's just me. Just like, there's always room for improvement. And now, reflecting back, is I love the journey. I love the work to get better. And so when you saying, oh, not many people do this, is like, to me, that's just normal.
Because you're putting yourself on the fast track to improve a lot.
I mean, it's this is probably why I love listening to entrepreneur podcasts, because I always listen. You always know about their mistakes. You always want to know what they did wrong.
Right.
And that's my wife. I love her to death about this. It's like her initial reaction be like, I can tell if it's a good piece or not, and like, she only likes 5 pieces. Stuff like that. Yep. So it's just how I've been. Just go about it. There's also the other part I was thinking is, there's a window where people remember things. So if you broke, how I view it, if you broke all the art things apart, so music and food go so well together, because
I agree.
Yeah, it's such a quick emotional reaction. You either love it or you don't, and it can transport you, which is, I think, it's a lot harder in the other art forms, like writing. When you read and stuff like that. Sure. It's when you read a book over and again, it takes a while for you to get transported to another realm. Because
you're also left sometimes to your imagination, right? Like, exactly. Someone describes a tropical beach. Your tropical beach is different than my tropical beach. Exactly. But if I serve you an onigiri rice ball with sesame and salmon, you can't perceive it as anything else. Yeah. Right? Like, maybe you have some memories that will trigger, but for the most part, it's very tangible.
You nailed it. And so, and I've had this discussion. I'm not sure how true it is, but the beauty of visual arts, it's timeless. Like, you could see a painting that was like, example, like not even Renaissance, but Greek sculptures.
Sure.
I wonder how often people look at it and know that they're looking back in time.
Mm-hmm. Did you hear Seth Godin's? This is an aside, but did you hear Seth Godin's podcast on the Greek and Roman? Maybe it was just Roman or maybe just Greek statues, and how we display them as being white.
Yeah, they used to be painted.
And they used to be painted.
Yeah,
that's very interesting to me.
I didn't know, but I knew that from art history.
Yeah. It's a really good pod. You'll have to listen to it.
I have to listen to that. Yes, definitely.
It's really good.
But and that's the thing is, and that's what I think is fascinating, and that goes back to the audience comment is we will tell the story to ourselves. We as humans, we will rationalize everything. Like a perfect example is we all back then thought the world was flat.
Right.
And one person goes, I don't think so, and here we are.
It's all flipped.
Right. And there's some people now who still think the world is flat.
Not wrong.
Right. So that in itself, to me, finds fascinating. It's like what we take for granted because we have no evidence or stuff like that, but we believe it's truth is fascinating. And so going back to asking questions about a meal, your experience, I'm almost, like you said, I'm probing. I want to know, one, it's hard enough to get people to come to an event. That's I actually have a book, like there's 8 truths. Like if you ask 10 people, go, hey, you want to go to an art museum? Maybe I bet you 2 people will go. Okay. Hey, do you want to go to a place you get free food? Oh, there's like 8 out of 10 people are going to come.
True. It's true.
So to eat with your eyes, I was like, it's a natural transition. You have to get food to get you in. And I was an RA in college.
Right.
If I didn't put free food on an event, no one would come.
Yeah.
So to me, I was just like, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. So the thing that I wanted to ask next was, if you had to distill one question that it's given you the most ROI when you ask someone about an experience, or maybe something surprising where, like, I always get the most unique answers when I ask this. Like, if you did a 50-person event tomorrow and you had to speed question them all, what would be the one question that you would ask to get the most out feedback-wise out of them?
That's so funny. Like, people are like, oh, what's your favorite dish? What was the worst dish? We're gonna like those. To me, I've been done it for a while. Those are like kind of the primary questions. As someone who doesn't really understand their audience and what you're trying to achieve. Right. And I'm not accusing anybody because I'm still going through that.
Sure.
The best question I have is, if you had to tell your friend or family to come to this event, what would you tell them?
Right.
That in itself has so much content to understand what the person is. And the reason why you can, like you said, dissect it is, like we talked about our previous projects, what's the story you want to tell?
Yep.
So right there, you find out what your audience, what they got from the event.
Right.
That's one thing. 2, you find out emotionally or what memories they got from that event. 3, how do they explain it to their friends?
Right.
So their brain is already kind of,
in sales mode.
Yeah. And so then what they're going to tell their friends.
Sure.
And what they're going to tell your friends is then what you need to say.
Yeah. Because that's the thing is, like, you can do all the marketing in the world, but the reputation is what people say behind your back kind of thing. Totally. I agree.
That's to me right now. I'm still learning, so I'm no expert at all. That's the best question that gives me all different answers, but tells me so much.
Because, I mean, say all you want about social media and whatever, word of mouth in our industry is still the most valuable form of marketing. Period.
Absolutely.
Period.
We went to Lawson because David Chang says, I think this is the best food you can get in Japan.
So
and it's a convenience store. And
so
I'm like,
true.
Well, dang, we need to so do that.
It's true.
I'm not going to get to a fancy restaurant.